VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker, and we are on May 3rd. We have rookie mini camps, so to speak, in about a week, and we are less than 5 weeks away from mandatory mini camp where everybody gets together in Eagan. We are back with several guests as well, and we're going to start to pick their brains. We've got the draft in the rear view, which is pretty sweet. There's still some free agents the Vikings can sign. There's some folks that have some concerns about the depth chart, but let's hop right into it. Nate, first time on the show. How are you, man?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. And then where do you live and how did you become a Viking fan?
I live in Fort Worth, but I'm from North Carolina. I have all my family grew up in Minnesota. They're all living in Minnesota. Spent a lot of time in Minnesota, and started rooting actually for the Redskins, their Commanders in Carolina, because back then they didn't have a team, so that's who I was cheering for. I kind of came over to the family side of the Vikings in '96.
Okay.
Then.
Ironically, that's the same year I became a Viking fan. So we've been through the same ups and downs, if you will.
Yeah.
All right. So the Vikings roster, they did not draft any wide receivers, any running backs, and then they were super busy in undrafted free agency, a Kwesi Adolphus special per usual. I'd like to know from you, as you size up the current depth chart, the current roster, who is one free agent that you would love to see hop on board?
Dalton Risner.
No caption needed. Dalton Risner.
Yeah. Who's playing guard? I mean, that's my real question. Is it going to be like Blake Brandel? I mean, I don't think Risner is like the bee's knees. I mean, there's probably better out there, but at this point, I don't think there is. They didn't pick anybody up really in the draft for that position, and I mean, he's definitely better than the quality of line play that we've seen over the years. I mean, he's workable, right? He's got strengths and weaknesses. He's really good at pass blocking, not so much in the run, but you have a better running back now. You have Aaron Jones, and if the rest of the line is coming back and strong, I think he's a known quantity at least. Whereas, rolling the dice on somebody else, you never know. But I think that's definitely a position they need to look at going forward. My other thing would probably be someone on the defensive line, and I'm not sure really who's available. Everybody I thought that was still available is gone, but it seems like they need some meat up there. Somebody else other than, what do they have? Like one guy that's over 300 pounds right now. Seems like they need somebody else to kind of hold down the fort, so to speak, with Harrison Phillips.
Yeah, they basically, if you want to look at prototypical nose tackles, like the Vikings have zilch. I haven't done my enough homework on the UDFAs to see if there's one guy who's a mammoth human. But we call Harrison Phillips a nose tackle, I guess. But yeah, there are no big Linval Joseph types. So that leads me to believe if Brian Flores is like, nah, we don't need those. Curiously, last year though, kind of the same setup, although they had Kairos Tonga. And the Vikings ranked third per rushing yards allowed, like third best, and sixth in rushing yards allowed in general. So I'm hoping that we can trust Flores because, last year the rushing game improved. I think we have memories of the death of the Zimmer defense. That rushing defense in the last part of it was awful. And then Donatel's certainly wasn't very good. All right, so Risner's the endorsement from Nate. Garrett, I'm going to go to you. I feel like I know you or have met you. Maybe not. But tell me when you became a Viking fan and where you're from right now.
So I grew up in Wisconsin and just kind of similar to Nate, I guess, inherited Vikings from family. But I do live in Sartell, Minnesota now.
Okay.
And so it's, much easier. I don't have to fight that battle with a bunch of cheeseheads all the time. But yeah, really been a Vikings fan as long as I remember. Just like I said, both parents were originally from Minnesota, and so just kind of grew up with those roots. And thankfully I'm young enough. I don't, if I'm being honest, remember 1998. That's probably when memories first started. My dad was probably grumpy for a while after, but
most certainly.
But I've definitely lived through all the heartache since then.
Okay.
And remember vividly a lot of them, but yeah.
All right, so Nate has Reisner and a defensive lineman in general. For me, I don't want to take anybody's thunder, so I won't say the name. What would it be for you if it's not Reisner? Which free agent would you get the buzz to your phone? You're like, sweet, we got this guy. Who is it?
I think it's more positional than, I'll definitely second the little D-line help, any rotation we can get there. But one I'm going to target is just some wide receiver depth. There's a couple names I think that I've still seen out there that I like. Maybe not love, but Zay Jones, DJ Chark, a couple guys that kind of some seasoned vets that I think would be good. I mean, as great as Jefferson is, we, overall still have a really young wide receiver team. So I mean, a guy with a few years under his belt to be nice, and honestly, I love Powell, but I think he's still better in kind of that wide receiver 4, and dude stepped up when he needed to last year, but just guys get hurt. Would love to see a little more depth there.
I agree because I've said on this show a few times the dudes that we debate right now, Trent Sherfield, newcomer, Jalen Naylor, who seems promising and fast but never really does anything, and then Brandon Powell. It seems like it's best served for a WR4 debate, and we are having it in WR3. And I will tell you right now, if TJ Hawkinson, if that Kirby Joseph bullshit never happened, I wouldn't care who the WR3 is because Hawkinson is the WR3 per his target load. But Hawkinson's probably not going to play for the first part of the season. And if you have a reclamation project in Sam Darnold or this the sweet hope that McCarthy starts week 1 or something like that, you're going to want to have a WR3 who's trustworthy. The cool part about a WR3 is you only really need the guy to produce 600, 700 yards and 4, 5, 6 touchdowns. So when you're looking for a free agent, or we thought perhaps a rookie, you don't need to find some absolute badass. You need to find a guy who's trustworthy, kind of like Jarius Wright. That's why everybody loved him. So we got offensive line. Garrett has very wise going WR3. I call Amir the great prognosticator. He was on the show the Saturday for the draft. He told us, hey, what if JJ McCarthy falls? That was his hot take. I said, I don't know, man. They don't have that type of patience. Amir was right. Welcome back to the show, Amir. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me again, guys. I hope I'm not hope you guys are not sick of seeing my beautiful face, but always great to join you all.
Amir in full Timberwolves mode, like a lot of folks. They play Saturday, by the way. We're talking football today, Amir. All right, so we have offensive line attention in the form of Dalton Reisner. I like Greg Van Roten from the Raiders. Garrett has a request for a WR3. Is there something we haven't covered in terms of free agency that Amir would like to see on these Vikings?
Yeah, so there were two position groups I mainly targeted.
Mm-hmm.
I will be full disclosure. The number one guy I had wanted, because I do agree with what Garrett said. WR3. I wanted DJ Chark, but it appears he has signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. So there's a couple options there, but I think I'm gonna go off the grid. I'm gonna go with a position that is not actually a weakness, but could help fill a weakness, which is I think Emmanuel Ogba is a guy I'd like to target. Now, you guys may look at me crazy, but I think I want to say is Alec Lewis. Somebody mentioned the possibility of maybe with the drafting of Dallas Turner, maybe you have a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel play more at D tackle. He's not that big, but just with the versatility and he has experience in Miami playing at that nose guard position, even though he's undersized. And I just feel like you can never have enough guys on the defensive line. And Agba, of course, his biggest production was under Brian Flores in Miami. So I think a guy, and he probably won't cost as much. So I think if I had to pick one guy in particular, it'd be Emmanuel Agba.
So Jihad Ward doesn't really do it for you?
Nah, he's never really been good or dependable. His numbers are not that great. I, f- I feel I don't know. I feel like at this point of the off season, guys
Mm-hmm.
who are released or they they probably would wanted more money earlier. You could probably get them cheaper. So I just feel like of all the options available, Agba seems to be the most intriguing to me.
And certainly a Brian Flores guy, if you will, to show you how far we've come in the offseason. I'm old enough to remember way back in February and March when Agba could have been a solution. I remember thinking, all right, they'll get Daniil Hunter back. I'm sure they're going to get some bargain bin guy to go along with them. And now here we are, and we're like, can we get Agba just as like the fifth pass rusher? That's how awesome this defense has blossomed on paper, from Andrew Van Ginkel, mentioned by Amir, Jonathan Greenard from the Texans. And then, by the way, we are just going to trade a handsome little sum for Dallas Turner. So there are options. Tyler, did you have one you want to mention that hasn't been named by the group?
I do, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Hockenson, obviously, he's probably going to miss the start of the year. You're looking for maybe a cheap tight end who can handle, 5 to 7 targets a game. One guy that comes to mind for me is Robert Tonyan, is a free agent. That's someone who, used to be on the Packers, used to be on the Bears. You could probably sign him to pretty cheap deal and have him play for a few games. And then when Hockenson comes back, you can do what you want with him. But, usually when you float out tight end names, it's guys that like would want a substantial amount of money or some sort of role long term. I think Tanyan's at that stage of his career where he'll accept anything at this point. So, and he gets to play against Green Bay and Chicago twice a year. So that's not a bad gig for him at all. Another guy that I think of is Kareem Hunt, is a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're just looking for like an RB2, RB3 kind of guy, not a bad option there. And then I know he's a head case at wide receiver, but Michael Thomas, free agent, wide receiver 3 at this stage of his career, next to Addison and Jefferson, is really not a bad gig at all. So those are some guys that I look at. I don't think the probability is high for any of them, but and one more, Mason Cole, former Viking center, free agent. If you're just looking for a backup center, bring back Mason Cole. Not a bad idea.
That was one of Quasi's first trades, or was that Spielman? Somebody shipped him to the Steelers. I think it was Quasi.
Are you thinking Jesse Davis?
Oh, Mason Cole. I'm sorry. Spielman got Mason Cole from the Cardinals, and that was the era of the offensive line where we thought that was a sweet-ass solution because we were like, oh, they don't do anything cool on the offensive line. So, yeah, my bad there. Mason Cole ended up going to the Steelers, and I think started at center. So my free agent that I've circled is no surprise to viewers of the show. So right now, I think most of us are kind of in this May frame of mind where we assume this is a flyover year for the Vikings, where we think probably go 7-10, 8-9. But I'm here to tell you, by the time we get to training camp and preseason, every one of you sons of bitches is going to get excited, and we're going to convince ourselves that they can be a wild card contender, me included. I know I'm going to get there, and that's why they should sign Calais Campbell. He's the last remaining defensive tackle. You might say, hey, that guy is, Dustin's age. I'm 40. I think Calais is like 37, 38. Calais Campbell never shows up to a season and sucks. He's always the same guy. He's equitable when it comes to stopping the run and rushing the passer. And he played for the Falcons for the last couple seasons, which leads me to believe that he's not chasing Super Bowl rings. So merely by default, because the Vikings missed out on 7 free agent defensive tackles that, your grandma knows the guy's name. Calais Campbell is the last remaining guy, and man, that defensive line would look so juicy if that was the solution instead of Tillery or Jonah Williams or Jonathan Bullard. That's my soapbox on the free agent. I want to go to Nate. We want to talk about some concerns about the current roster. We kind of doubled up a little bit talking about roster needs and free agents that we'd like to see. So other than, I guess, left guard, do you have another concern, Nate, on this roster that keeps you up at night, so to speak?
Well, it was like the defensive tackle, and I was going to jump in Calais Campbell as well. I remember him when the Vikings played Arizona. It was probably 3 years ago. And, I mean, he was old and dusty then, and then he came out of nowhere and just completely wrecked that game for the Vikings. That was the game that they could have won, and he just showed up big time. And you're exactly right. He doesn't really jump out, but he always is. He's dependable. He's reliable. I mean, the guy's like almost 38 years old, but he's better than our other options. I mean, like I said, I'd rather have him in there playing. What about Fletcher Cox? He hasn't been signed yet, has he?
Did he retire, or is he still out there? We'll have to do our homework.
I think you're right. He might have retired too.
Okay.
But he's an option as well. We could
Mhm.
always bring back Unique Ngakwe. He's still available, but I mean, I don't know that he really fills the role. Like I said, it seems to
Mhm.
be like we need a bigger body. Calais Campbell is definitely that guy. I mean, he's a run stopper, but he's also somebody that can get in the backfield and cause some major problems on those early downs. So I mean that's what I'm looking at. And then as a Vikings fan, can you ever really be comfortable with the kicking situation?
Nope.
I mean, we have so many kickers right now that we don't have a kicker. I mean, they're probably both better than Greg Joseph, but I mean, who knows? I would like to think that O'Connell will handle things better than than Zimmer did with the kicking
Mhm.
situation with young kickers especially involved. But I mean, that is a wild card, and historically, that's been a thorn in the side of the Vikings forever.
When I think you're talking on the Calais Campbell game, I think that was the game where Joseph missed the game winner in week
Yep.
2 of 2021. And I remember articles circulating, almost jokes, that the Vikings should trade whatever it costs to get Justin Tucker. And I swear to God, based on the Vikings voodoo, he would get to Minnesota and some bad shit would happen. Like he'd start missing. So we do have those kicking fears that are mostly vindicated. There's also, if the Vikings wanted a space eater, as they don't have any. Linval Joseph is 35, 36. Not that he would start, but Kevin O'Connell said about 2 weeks ago that he didn't want Harrison Phillips to have as many snaps as he did last year. And that's great. But then you don't have anybody on the roster to relieve him of those snaps. So Linval Joseph is one to remember. Certainly not the guy he was, but he's played the last 2 years for contenders in the Eagles and Bills. Garrett, back to you. Roster concern. What do we have on that one?
I think trying to point out a new position, I gotta go corner still until we see something. I like the moves they've made at cornerback. I love the pick. I'm blanking on the name now.
Kyrie Jackson.
Out of Oregon. I mean, I like that pick a lot. I like who they've signed, but until we see some good shutdown play at corner, it's always going to be something I'm looking for, especially with, between the D line having some potential weaknesses. If they're not getting at QB, those corners are going to be, left on some islands at times.
Who do you forecast, sir? This cornerback room, although it is a concern because we don't really trust all of them, somebody's going to get cut out of these defensive backs. Some dudes on the bubble will probably be Lewis Seen, Andrew Booth. My goodness. I guess Shaquille Griffin, if he didn't have a good summer. Who do you think the odd man or men out will be at defensive back?
I mean, I think Seen's got to be leading candidate at the moment. I mean, if you look at on the field or, potential to get on the field, he really just unfortunately hasn't shown anything. And I think, it wasn't for that fact we spent first round capital to acquire him. That's about the only thread that might keep him on the team at this point.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of sunk cost fallacy. You just gotta let it go at this point.
Yeah, the summer battle at defensive back will be robust because there are a lot of competent guys. There's just no absolute superstars. Amir, we're going to go to you and then Tyler at the end. It's okay if some of this will double up because it makes sense that concerns are similar among all of us. What is one of your primary concerns about the Vikings' current roster or the Vikings in general?
Well, yeah, I guess my two biggest, like I said, I think my two biggest concerns are, yeah, at the D tackle position, which I don't know if there's, even if we got somebody like a Campbell or somebody, I don't know if that's a fix now. That's probably like a 2025 problem to solve. I think WR3 is a big one, and like you guys mentioned it, with Hawkinson probably missing the first couple weeks of the year, like, and you have a young quarterback either way, either Darnold who's still young or hopefully JJ is ready to play. You're gonna need, and especially like from last year, JJ was Justin was injured and missed 8 games. So what if either God forbid Jefferson or Addison or somebody gets hurt? You're gonna need somebody to fill up the load. So that's probably a big concern. I'm not quite sure how we're gonna fill it. But yeah, I think Unfortunately, just because of the lack of resources we had, the amount of resources we had this year, and the large amount of priorities, there's just certain position groups that were just going to be left unsolved, and it does concern me, but hopefully they find a solution.
Yeah, that is a very good point, Amir, because we haven't had anything on the field like training camp. I haven't even pondered Jefferson getting hurt or Addison getting hurt, but that's such a good point that if it is, boom, something happens in the summer, then you're staring at a wide receiving core, sans Hawkinson as well, of, hey, it's Jefferson, Brandon Powell, and Trent Sherfield, baby. You would go from being like that, especially if you get McCarthy involved early on. So yeah, that's like a light bulb moment for me that they should and really bring to emphasis the WR3 spot. Tyler, anything we didn't cover on concerns?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is just backup center. I think is rather overlooked simply because Bradbury's injury history is well documented, and our backup center is Dan Feeney, who I have zero faith in at all to be a starting caliber center if Bradbury goes down, which is why I advocated that, Mason Cole bringing him back would not be a bad idea. I think we had the luxury of having like an Austin Schlottman, who was a very reliable backup center. And I don't think we really have that anymore. So, definitely address that if they can. I mean, if Michael Juergens pops off in training camp, great, but that's not something you want to bank on. But that's pretty much it for me, man.
All right. Yeah, it's kind of, I was talking on a different podcast last night. We're in this real tender territory of the next 3 months where every UDFA and every late rounder is a guy who could blossom into something awesome. Just because you have to look at the best part of their scouting report, and we're like, hey, Juergens could be the next guy, or Prospect X, Levi Drake Rodriguez. He's got a clear path to ascend to defensive tackle. It's a really fun part of the year. The problem is, unless your name's Ivan Pace or I guess Stephon Diggs in 2015, they don't really ever pan out. But let's end on that note, gentlemen. Thank you for joining today. When you guys want to hop back on, hit Tyler up or hit the VikesNow messages up, and we'd love to have you back on. And until next time, Skol, baby.